The conference room in Building 208 smells of cigarette smoke and institutional tea, steeped too long in thermoses built for men who survived the Long March. Through the window, Beijing's sprawl stretches toward construction dust haze. It is 1989, and China rebuilds itself, though the generals at this table remain unconvinced that the rifle their soldiers carry needs rebuilding at all. At the head of the table, a Type 56 assault rifle rests like doctrine-made steel. 30 years of service. Never failed. And now, 3 engineers in ill-fitting suits propose replacing it with something that looks, to these uniformed men, like a plastic toy designed by people who have never heard a shot fired in a heated confrontation. Senior Engineer Wu, not his real name, because in the system that shaped him, individual glory dissolves into collective achievement, is 43 years old, thin-framed from decades at drafting tables rather than parade grounds. He's explaining for the 3rd time this month why the future of Chinese small arms cannot be a better Kalashnikov. Behind him, a pull-down screen keeps rolling back up. On it, technical drawings of a rifle that defies every orthodoxy this army has held since 1949. Bullpup configuration, magazine behind the trigger, action nestled against the shooter's shoulder. Chambered not for the Soviet 7.62 kg 39mm cartridge that has fed Chinese rifles since Korea, but for a new, untested 5.842 millitured round that exists only in the ballistics laboratory 2 floors below. The skepticism in the room is existential. These generals came of age in an army that learned infantry tactics from Soviet advisors, that built doctrine around Mikhail Kalashnikov's proven reliability, that survived internal conflicts, invasions, and revolution with weapons that could be buried in Manchurian mud and still function when needed. The Type 56 on the table represents more than a weapon. It represents continuity, proven design, the hard-won wisdom of survival. And Wu, with his untested blueprints and calculations requiring mathematics most of these men never studied, asks them to abandon it for something that looks designed for science fiction, not the People's Liberation Army. The barrel length is maintained, Wu says quietly, tapping the schematic with a pencil worn to a nub. Same accuracy. But overall length matches a submachine gun. Urban encounters, vehicle interiors, close quarters. We do not plan to fight in cities, a general interrupts. His uniform bears medals from border disputes Wu has only read about. We plan to defend open country. For that, the Type 56 has never failed us. Wu pauses. He has learned that silence sometimes communicates more than argument. On the table before him, a folder contains intelligence reports these men have not seen or have chosen not to see. Reports from the Falklands in 1982, where British troops found their L1A1 rifles too long for trench struggle. From Afghanistan, where Soviet forces discovered the AK-47's effective range left them outmatched by local fighters with old British .303s on mountain ridges. From the Gulf conflict last year, where American M16A2s engaged opposing forces at ranges where Type 56s would be ineffective. The world is changing. Doctrine is not. May I ask, Wu begins carefully, what our doctrine will be if the nature of conflict changes faster than our procurement cycles? The room goes colder than Beijing winter. What Wu cannot answer, not in this room, not today, is whether his design can survive the institutional machinery that grinds innovation into dust, whether field necessity will override bureaucratic certainty, whether lives will be lost waiting for old men to accept new truths. The question is not whether his rifle works on paper. The question is whether reality can defeat doctrine before doctrine leads to more losses than the adversary ever will. If stories like this make you question what you do when everyone says you're wrong, but you know you're right, tell us in the comments and stay with us for the next chapters. What would you sacrifice to save lives no one knows you're saving? Architected 6-part historical narrative about weapon innovation and institutional resistance. The testing ground outside Beijing is frozen in January morning, and Wu's breath clouds white as he watches a squad run firing drills with Type 56. The sound is familiar, the sharp crack of 7.62-meter rounds, the metallic clatter of spent casings, the rhythmic discipline of soldiers who trust their equipment absolutely. But Wu is not watching the soldiers. He is watching the targets, measuring the groupings, counting the seconds between the first shot and an effective hit at 300 meters. The numbers tell a story these soldiers do not know they are living. In his office that night, Wu spreads intelligence summaries across a desk scarred by countless cups of tea. The 1982 Falklands conflict. British troops struggled with L1A1 rifles too long for ship corridors and trench systems. Afghanistan throughout the 1980s, Soviet AK-47s, reliable as sunrise, consistently outranged by older weapons in mountain terrain. The Gulf conflict, barely months past. American infantry engaging at distances where Chinese doctrine assumes engagement doesn't happen. Wu's team, 2 other engineers who work in silence and leave their names off reports, has been studying clashes the People's Liberation Army never participated in. Learning from events that doctrine pretends are irrelevant. They will say none of this applies to us, one of them murmurs, reading over Wu's shoulder. His name is Chen, though that too might be a convenient fiction. They will say our tactics are different. Our tactics are different, Wu agrees. Until suddenly they are not. The genius of Wu's design lies not in revolution, but synthesis. The bullpup configuration is not new. The British fielded the EM2 in the 1950s before international pressure forced them back to conventional layouts. The Austrians successfully deployed the AUG in 1977. What Wu proposes is adapting this proven concept to Chinese manufacturing capabilities and tactical doctrine. A rifle the length of a submachine gun, with a full-length barrel preserving accuracy and velocity. The 5.8mm cartridge represents calculated compromise, lighter than Soviet 7.62mm, allowing personnel to carry more ammunition but heavier than American 5.56mm, retaining energy at extended range. On paper, it is elegant. In procurement meetings, it is heresy. You are asking us to abandon a system that has never failed, a colonel tells Wu at the next review, for something untested, expensive, and ideologically questionable. Ideologically questionable. It looks Western. It looks like you do not trust Soviet design philosophy. Wu chooses his words with the care of a man diffusing a sensitive device. I trust that Comrade Kalashnikov designed for the needs of his era. I propose we design for the needs of ours. The colonel's expression suggests Wu has just proposed abandoning the very foundations of their philosophy. That night, Wu returns to the workshop, a converted warehouse that smells of machine oil, metal shavings, and the particular cold that seeps through concrete floors. His first prototype sits on the bench, polymer furniture gleaming dully under fluorescent lights. It is beautiful in the way engineering solutions are beautiful, form-serving function with no wasted elegance. He picks it up. The weight is wrong, still too heavy. The balance point sits too far back. The ejection port will throw casings across the user's face. He knows all this because he has run the calculation 17 times. But holding it, feeling the cold polymer against his palms, Wu experiences something he cannot put in a report. Certainty. Not the institutional certainty of men who trust what has always worked, but the engineer's certainty that comes from understanding why something must work. Somewhere south, across the Taiwan Strait, tensions simmer beneath diplomatic language. Somewhere in Beijing's military planning offices, scenarios are gamed involving urban clashes, amphibious operations, and engagements at ranges and in environments where the Type 56's proven reliability may not be enough. But those scenarios remain classified, and Wu's rifle remains theoretical, and personnel continue training with equipment designed for a struggle that ended before most of them were born. The question Wu cannot ask aloud: how many will fall in the gap between what doctrine assumes and what modern reality demands. How long can you fight for something when everyone says you're wrong? Architected comprehensive narrative framework for six-part historical innovation story. Wu was 12 when he first understood that the world worked according to principles most people never questioned. His father, a machinist at a state factory in Shenyang, had brought home a broken lathe part and set it on the kitchen table like a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Everything that fails," his father said, "fails for a reason. Find the reason. You find the solution." 31 years later, standing in the cold weather testing facility watching his third QBZ-95 prototype crack apart in simulated Tibetan plateau conditions, Wu hears his father's voice with bitter clarity. Everything that fails, fails for a reason. The polymer furniture, chosen for weight savings crucial to the bullpup design, shatters at -20 degrees Celsius. The optical sight he designed to give Chinese infantrymen a decisive advantage in precision fogs completely in humidity tests. The ejection pattern throws hot metal directly across the user's face, exactly as the skeptics predicted. Each failure is documented, circulated, cited as evidence that the Type 56 should simply be upgraded with modern materials rather than replaced with Wu's futuristic vision. "Perhaps they are right," Chen says quietly, sweeping polymer fragments into a collection tray. "Perhaps we are solving a problem that does not exist." Wu says nothing. He's thinking of the intelligence report that arrived yesterday. Sanitized language describing a border skirmish where Type 56 equipped troops engaged opponents at ranges requiring precision the Kalashnikov's iron sights cannot reliably provide. Casualties: acceptable. Tactical outcome: satisfactory. The numbers underneath: 3 lost, 7 wounded, in an engagement that might have concluded differently with better equipment. Acceptable. "We test again," Wu says. "Different polymer compound. We have 16 more formulations to evaluate." Chen looks at him with something between admiration and pity. "Your wife called the office again. Wu has not been home in 4 days. His daughter's birthday was Tuesday. He knows this because he found the reminder note in his jacket pocket, written in his wife's precise characters, now crumpled and tea-stained. At home that night, briefly, quietly, careful not to wake his daughter, his wife finds him at the kitchen table with technical drawings spread across the surface where dinner should be. "They will never approve it," she says, not angry, resigned. "You are consuming yourself for something that will never exist." "It will exist." "Why? Because you need it to. Because you have decided." Wu looks up at her. May has the tired patience of someone who has watched her husband disappear into an obsession she cannot share and cannot stop. Because people are perishing with equipment that could be better. Because we are capable of better. Because... He stops. Because saying it aloud makes it sound like hubris, like the arrogance of a man who thinks he knows better than proven doctrine, tested systems, and institutional wisdom accumulated through decades of survival. But he does know better. The mathematics are not opinions. The ballistics are not subject to committee approval. Reality does not negotiate with bureaucracy. "I need 2 more months," he says quietly. May closes her eyes, opens them, nods once. She does not say, "You said that 2 months ago. You said that 6 months ago. You have been saying that since before our daughter learned to write your name." She leaves him there, surrounded by drawings of a rifle that generals call impossible, and she calls the thing that stole her husband. In the workshop, Wu redesigns the ejection port cover, adds a deflector, orders 17 different polymer compounds for temperature testing, abandons the optical sight for the initial production model, a concession to reliability and cost, but keeps the rail system, allowing for future upgrades when technology matures. This is how innovation survives institutional resistance, not through revolution, but through stubborn refinement, through proving each criticism can be answered, each failure corrected, until skepticism has no data left to stand on. But it is also how marriages erode, how childhoods pass unwatched, how men trade the warmth of family for the cold certainty of being right. Do you think you'd fight the system for what you believe works, or accept what doctrine says is impossible? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real innovation stories from history. When does conviction become obsession? And how do you know the difference? Architected 6-part narrative structure for innovation story. The 17th polymer compound survives. Wu watches the test technician retrieve the prototype from the climate chamber, where it has spent 72 hours cycling between the Gobi Desert's summer heat and the Tibetan Plateau's winter cold. The furniture should be cracked, warped, or brittle. The mechanism should be frozen or heat-stressed beyond tolerance. The technician loads the device, fires, cycles the action, fires again. The rifle keeps functioning. Chen, standing beside Wu in the observation room, releases a breath neither of them realized he was holding. Compound BX-17, the technician reports, voice carefully neutral. Copolymer blend with reinforced crystalline structure. Temperature range -40 to +60 Celsius. No structural degradation. Wu allows himself 5 seconds of something that might be triumph. Then he returns to the checklist, because one solved problem simply reveals the next. The ejection deflector works. The simplified sights, abandoning the optical system for now, prove robust and practical for the field. The 5.8 mm cartridge groups consistently at 300 meters, which the Type 56's 7.60 mm cannot match with iron sights in field conditions. But the rifle remains theoretical until it proves itself in hands that matter. The breakthrough comes not from Wu's team, but from an unexpected ally. Senior Colonel Zhang is 58. A veteran of border clashes who walks with a limp from an injury Chinese surgeons treated in 1979. He sits across from Wu in the Institute cafeteria, not the conference room because this conversation does not officially exist. I commanded infantry companies with Type 56s for 15 years, Zhang says quietly, stirring tea that has gone cold. I trusted that equipment with my life, with my soldiers' lives. Wu waits. But I also read the after-action reports you probably think we ignore. The Gulf conflict demonstrated something our doctrine does not want to acknowledge, that engagement ranges are increasing, that visual superiority matters, and that equipment length becomes critical in mechanized and urban operations. Zhang sets down his spoon with careful precision. I cannot override the procurement committee, but I can request field trials for promising systems. If your rifle performs in real conditions, with line infantry who have no stake in protecting your career or doctrine, that data becomes impossible to dismiss. You are risking your career, Wu observes. I am risking my retirement being delayed. Zhang smiles without humor. You are risking your family, your reputation, possibly your freedom if this fails badly enough. We are not taking equivalent risks, Engineer Wu. The field trials are authorized for late 1994. Not elite special units who might be expected to handle experimental equipment, but line infantry companies stationed along the Taiwan Strait, where tensions simmer beneath fragile diplomatic language. Wu spends 6 months refining production techniques, training technicians, and documenting maintenance procedures. He writes a manual that assumes the user has never seen a bullpup configuration. He tests, retests, and tests again every component that might fail when lives depend on it. The night before the equipment ships south, Wu sits alone in the workshop. The prototype, the first one that survived full testing, rests on the bench before him. He picks it up, feeling the weight he has held 1,000 times in development, knowing he will never hold it quite this way again. Tomorrow it becomes real. Tomorrow, personnel who do not know his name will trust their safety to his mathematics, his iterations, and his stubborn certainty that he could build something better. Tomorrow, reality and doctrine finally meet on terms doctrine cannot control. Chen finds him there at midnight. You should go home. See your daughter before... Before what? Before we discover I was wrong? Before people perish because I convinced myself I was smarter than proven systems? Before you discover you were right, Chen corrects gently, and have to live with what that cost. Wu sets the rifle down carefully. Outside, Beijing spreads beneath winter stars, a city rebuilding itself while men in workshops fight smaller, quieter battles about what the future should hold. In the south, young personnel receive equipment that looks wrong, feels wrong, and challenges everything their training taught them about how their tools should work. And in the gap between what is and what might be, Wu waits for the only verdict that matters. Not committees, not doctrine, but the brutal honesty of men whose lives depend on whether he was right. If you could see the future of your work, but not know if you'd survive to see it vindicated, would you still sacrifice everything for it? Architected six-part narrative structure around innovation and institutional resistance. The report arrives in March 1995, 6 months after the pre-production QBZ-95 rifles reached the line infantry companies stationed along the Taiwan Strait. Wu reads it 3 times before allowing himself to believe what the numbers say. The initial reports had been mixed, exactly as Wu expected. Personnel complained about unfamiliar ergonomics, the different manual of operations, and the way the bullpup configuration changed the rifle's center of balance. Technicians reported maintenance concerns with the new cartridge system. Officers expressed skepticism that polymer materials could withstand field conditions. Then came live fire exercises designed to simulate cross-strait engagement scenarios. Troops using the QBZ-95 consistently hit targets at ranges where Type 56 users were still adjusting their sights. The shorter overall length made the tool easier to maneuver in cramped positions that line the coast. The reduced recoil of the 5.8mm cartridge allowed faster follow-up shots, tighter groupings, and less ammunition wasted. But the line that changes everything, buried in the technical assessment on page 17, system demonstrated reliability equivalent to the Type 56 platform across all environmental conditions tested, with marked improvement in effective engagement range and target acquisition speed. Recommend full evaluation for service-wide deployment. Equivalent reliability. The words that dismantle every doctrinal argument against change. Chen finds Wu standing motionless in the workshop, holding the report like a historical document. They are recommending adoption, Chen says quietly. You were right. Wu says nothing. He is thinking of the 3 years since that first conference room presentation. The nights away from family, the mockery from peers who called his design a plastic fantasy, the quiet certainty that kept him testing polymer compounds when rational men would have accepted defeat. He was right. It feels less like triumph than exhaustion. There is more, Chen continues. Senior Colonel Zhang is presenting to the procurement committee next month. He wants you there. They will want to know why I questioned Soviet design philosophy. They will want to know why they should spend billions replacing a system that works with one that works slightly better. Wu looks at the prototype on his bench, the one that survived all testing, that now sits in a museum of failures overcome. Because slightly better means more people come home instead of being lost. Because equivalent reliability with improved performance is not a luxury, it is an obligation. Because we are capable of better, and that makes settling for good enough a choice to accept preventable losses. Chen studies his colleague with the expression of someone witnessing a man realize the cost of being proven right. If they adopt it, you will receive no public credit. You know this. Wu nods. In the Chinese system, designers are state assets, identities protected, and achievements credited to collective research institutes rather than individual genius. His name will not appear in military newspapers announcing the new rifle's deployment. No medals in public ceremonies. I do not need credit, Wu says. I need people to stop falling due to inferior equipment. The People's Liberation Army officially adopts the QBZ-95 in late 1995, though full deployment takes another decade as manufacturing capacity expands and training protocols adapt. Wu does not attend the announcement ceremony. He is in the workshop, already working on improvements for the next generation, because innovation never ends, it only shifts focus. The vindication comes not in recognition but in silence. The absence of reports citing mechanical failures, the lack of casualty statistics attributed to insufficient range or technical problems, and the quiet efficiency of a system that works so well it becomes invisible. Within the community of military engineers, Wu's design becomes a reference point, proof that Chinese development can innovate rather than merely copy, and that the People's Liberation Army can break from Soviet doctrine when strategic necessity demands it. But in his apartment at night, Wu sits across from Mei at a dinner table where his daughter's chair remains empty. She is at university now, studying engineering herself, perhaps trying to understand the father who disappeared into his work when she needed him most. Was it worth it? Mei asks, not accusatory, genuinely curious. Wu considers the question with the honesty it deserves. I do not know yet, he admits. Ask me when I'm old enough to understand what I sacrificed. The rifle exists. Personnel carry it. Lives are saved by millimeters of improved accuracy, seconds of faster target acquisition, and the reliable function of polymer compounds that survived 17 iterations. But Wu's daughter does not know the man her father became while chasing vindication, and that absence cannot be filled by technical specifications or procurement approvals. How do you measure success when the cost is invisible and the victory cannot be shared with the people who paid for it? Orchestrated comprehensive narrative framework for 6-part historical innovation story. Final part. Need to show the long-term consequences, the 2008 Tibetan unrest appearance, the broader impact on Chinese development, and Wu's reflective epilogue about the paradox of successful design. Must end with moral closure and the final CTA. The photograph appears in Western intelligence briefings in 2008. Paramilitary police in Lhasa, carrying distinctive bullpup rifles during the Tibetan unrest. Analysts note the tool, realize it represents a generational shift in Chinese small arms, and begin studying its implications for the regional military balance. The rifle Wu, designed in obscurity, becomes a symbol, though not one he ever intended. It appears in military parades, in propaganda photographs, and in the hands of honor guards at state functions. The visible edge of Chinese military modernization. Wu, watching from retirement in a Beijing apartment that smells of old tea and technical journals, knows that equipment is only as effective as the doctrine, training, and logistics that support it. The QBZ-95 succeeded not because it was revolutionary, but because it was right, the correct synthesis at the correct moment, solving problems doctrine had denied existed. But the true consequence of Wu's design is measured not in ballistics or ergonomics, but in precedent. After the QBZ-95, Chinese development begins to diverge more boldly from Soviet templates. New tank designs incorporate Western suspension concepts. Aircraft programs pursue indigenous electronics rather than copying Russian systems. The rifle becomes proof that Chinese engineers can be trusted to innovate, that breaking from proven designs does not guarantee failure, and that institutional resistance can be overcome through patient demonstration of results. Wu occasionally lectures at the Beijing Institute of Technology, standing before students who have never held a rifle outside military training, explaining the principles that guided his work. They know him only as Senior Engineer Wu, and he prefers it that way. The irony he recognizes but rarely speaks. The QBZ-95 was designed to give personnel an advantage in a major conflict that never came. The Taiwan Strait crisis that drove its development in the early 1990s never escalated to the large-scale scenarios military planners gamed out in classified briefings. The rifle has been used in operations, in counter-terrorism, in border incidents, and in peacekeeping deployments, but never in the widespread conflict that justified its design costs and institutional upheaval. Does that make it a failure? A student asks during one lecture, young enough to believe questions have simple answers. Wu considers this carefully. The best military innovations are those that never have to prove themselves in the massive struggles they were designed to win. The QBZ-95 sits in armories across China, maintained, ready, a deterrent rather than just a tool of force. In that I find a measure of peace with what my hands created. But late at night, in the apartment he shares with May, their daughter now an engineer herself, working on systems Wu cannot discuss and would not understand, he holds a photograph from 1989. 3 engineers in ill-fitting suits, standing before a pull-down screen showing a rifle that looked impossible. Chen passed away in 2003 at his desk, still working on improvements to the platform they created together. The third team member, whose name Wu has protected all these years, lives in Shenzhen now, designing commercial electronics, the military work quietly forgotten. And Wu remains, watching new generations of engineers cite his work as they propose their own departures from orthodoxy, their own battles against institutional resistance that assumes yesterday's solutions will suffice for tomorrow's problems. "Do you regret it?" May asks, finding him with the photograph at midnight. The question she has asked in different forms for 30 years. I regret the cost. I do not regret the necessity. Is there a difference? Wu sets the photograph down carefully. The rifle that generals dismissed as a plastic toy is now the standard tool of the world's largest standing army. That happened not through revolutionary rhetoric, but through incremental validation, through surviving every criticism until skepticism had nowhere left to stand. That process required sacrifice. Whether the sacrifice was worth it, that is not for me to judge. Who judges then? The ones who came home because their equipment worked at the ranges that mattered. The ones who never knew my name but trusted my mathematics with their lives. History, perhaps, if it remembers at all. The final truth Wu has learned, that the future belongs not to those who defend what has always worked, but to those who can prove what will work better, one test at a time, until doubt becomes confidence and resistance becomes adoption. The QBZ-95 is not the best rifle ever designed, but it is the rifle China needed at the moment it chose to step beyond the shadow of Soviet doctrine. In that specific achievement, it represents something more than metal and polymer, the moment when Chinese engineering found its own voice. And Wu, anonymous architect of that voice, sits in retirement understanding that some victories cannot be celebrated publicly, some costs cannot be recovered, and some truths must be proven even when no one will remember who proved them. The tool endures. The man who created it dissolves into institutional memory, name protected, achievement collective, and legacy measured not in recognition, but in the silent efficiency of a system that works so well it becomes invisible. Exactly as the system intended, exactly as Wu accepted when he chose this path. If this story reminded you that changing the world often means being right before anyone believes you, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story. In the end, what matters more, being remembered for what you created or knowing it works when lives depend on it?